For decades, millions of Americans have worked hard, saved consistently, and watched their traditional IRA balances grow year after year. They checked account statements, celebrated market gains, and felt reassured seeing those retirement numbers climb. But what if one of the biggest financial risks in retirement isn't a market crash, a recession, or even inflation? What if the real threat has been sitting quietly inside that retirement account the entire time? Here's the surprising reality. Many retirees spend years focusing on how much money is in their traditional IRA while paying very little attention to how much of that money may eventually belong to the IRS. And that's where a growing number of retirees are running into trouble. Most people view their IRA balance as their retirement wealth. They look at the total number and assume that's what they'll have available to spend throughout retirement. But the overlooked detail is that every dollar inside a traditional IRA has a tax obligation attached to it. The government has allowed those contributions and earnings to grow tax-deferred for years, sometimes decades. Eventually, however, that tax bill comes due. The problem is that many retirees don't realize how quickly that bill can grow until it's too late to make the most effective adjustments. In fact, there is a limited planning window available right now that many retirement experts are paying close attention to. For retirees with traditional IRAs, the years leading up to 2028 may represent one of the most important opportunities to evaluate future tax exposure before several factors begin reducing flexibility. And once that window closes, some options may become much harder to use effectively. Consider a hypothetical retiree named Robert. Robert spent nearly 40 years building his retirement savings. By the time he retired, he had accumulated a substantial traditional IRA. He felt confident because he had done everything he was supposed to do. He avoided unnecessary spending, contributed regularly, and stayed invested through market ups and downs. From his perspective, retirement looked secure. What Robert didn't fully consider was what would happen when future withdrawal requirements started increasing and additional retirement income sources began stacking together. Years later, he found himself facing larger taxable withdrawals than expected. His retirement income looked healthy on paper, but a growing portion of it was being exposed to taxation. Suddenly, decisions that seemed harmless years earlier became expensive. The frustrating part? Many of those decisions could have been evaluated during a period when he had significantly more control. And Robert's situation isn't unique. Across America, retirees are discovering that retirement planning doesn't end when the paychecks stop. In many ways, an entirely new phase begins. The focus shifts from accumulating assets to managing taxes, withdrawals, income streams, and long-term wealth preservation. Unfortunately, this is where many people let their guard down. After years of concentrating on saving money, they assume the hard part is over. What nobody explains is that retirement can create a series of tax decisions that have long-lasting consequences. Some retirees make those decisions intentionally. Others make them by default simply because they never knew there was a choice. That's why the period before 2028 is attracting so much attention. The conversation isn't necessarily about predicting the future with certainty. It's about recognizing that retirees currently possess something incredibly valuable: flexibility. Right now, many retirees still have the ability to evaluate their future income picture, estimate potential tax exposure, and consider strategies that may not be as effective later. Time creates options, but time also removes options. And that is the hidden deadline many people never see. The financial impact can be significant because retirement taxes often develop slowly. They don't usually arrive as a single shocking event. Instead, they build quietly over time through larger account balances, increasing withdrawal requirements, changing income levels, and years of delayed planning. By the time many retirees notice the problem, they're no longer making proactive decisions. They're reacting to circumstances that have already been set in motion. That's why awareness matters so much. This isn't about creating panic. It's about understanding that retirement accounts are more than savings vehicles. They are also future tax events waiting to happen. The retirees who recognize that reality early often have more choices available to them than those who wait until mandatory withdrawals and other financial pressures begin dictating their next move. And once you understand that a hidden retirement tax clock may already be ticking, an important question naturally follows. Why are so many retirees affected by this issue without realizing it until much later? Why are so many retirees walking straight into this problem without realizing it? The answer is surprisingly simple. Most people have spent their entire working lives hearing the same message. Once you retire, your taxes will probably go down. It's one of the most common assumptions in retirement planning. The logic seems reasonable. You're no longer earning a paycheck. You're no longer commuting to work every day. Your career has ended. So naturally, many people assume they'll move into a lower tax situation. For some retirees, that does happen. But for millions of others, retirement creates a very different reality. What many retirees don't realize is that retirement income doesn't come from just one source. Instead, it often comes from multiple places at the same time: a pension, Social Security benefits, traditional IRA withdrawals, 401k distributions, investment income, interest payments, dividends, rental income, and sometimes even part-time work. Individually, none of these income streams may seem particularly concerning, but when they begin stacking together, the tax picture can look very different than expected. This is where many retirees experience their first major surprise. They stop working and expect their taxable income to fall dramatically. Instead, they discover that retirement income can remain much higher than anticipated. Consider a hypothetical retiree named Susan. Susan retires at age 66 after a successful career. She assumes her tax burden will shrink because her salary is gone. At first glance, that seems true. But then she starts collecting Social Security benefits. A few years later, she begins withdrawing money from her traditional IRA. She also receives income from a small pension she earned years earlier. On top of that, her investment portfolio generates dividends each year. Suddenly, Susan isn't relying on one income source. She's relying on four. And together, those income streams create a much larger tax picture than she ever expected. The surprising reality is that retirement often changes where income comes from, not necessarily how much income exists. That's a distinction many people overlook, and because they overlook it, they underestimate future tax exposure. Another reason retirees walk into this blind is that traditional IRAs create a false sense of security. For years, account statements display a growing balance. The number looks impressive. Maybe it's $300,000, maybe $500,000, maybe over $1 million, but what retirees often see is the gross balance. What they don't always consider is the after-tax value. The IRS has not forgotten about that money. In many cases, every dollar withdrawn from a traditional IRA may be subject to ordinary income taxation. That means the account balance many retirees view as theirs may ultimately be shared with the government through future taxes. This isn't a problem that appears overnight. That's part of what makes it so easy to ignore. The danger develops quietly. Year after year, account balances grow, markets appreciate, tax-deferred assets compound, and because no immediate tax bill arrives, many retirees assume everything is fine. Then eventually, reality catches up. Many retirees discover this too late because retirement planning conversations often focus heavily on accumulation. How much have you saved? How much do you need? How fast is your portfolio growing? Those are important questions, but they're only part of the equation. The overlooked detail is what happens when that money eventually comes back out. A retirement account isn't simply a savings account. It's a future income stream, and future income streams create future tax consequences. There's another factor making this issue even more important. Today's tax environment may not remain unchanged forever. No one knows exactly what future tax laws will look like. No one can predict future rates with certainty. But history shows that tax rules evolve over time. Congress makes changes. Income thresholds change. Retirement regulations change. Planning opportunities appear and disappear. That's why many financial professionals emphasize flexibility. The goal isn't predicting the future perfectly. The goal is avoiding a situation where future changes leave retirees with fewer choices than they have today. Think about the difference between two retirees. The first retiree assumes taxes will somehow work themselves out. The second retiree regularly reviews future income projections, withdrawal strategies, and potential tax exposure. Both may have identical account balances. Both may have worked equally hard, but one understands how future income sources interact, while the other simply hopes for the best. That awareness can create a significant difference over time. And that's what makes this issue so important. It's not just about taxes, it's about control. Retirees who understand the hidden forces shaping future taxable income often have more flexibility, more planning options, and fewer unpleasant surprises. Those who ignore these factors may eventually find themselves reacting to circumstances rather than shaping them. Now that we've seen why this problem is far more common than most retirees realize, it's time to examine the first major risk hidden inside traditional IRAs, one that can quietly grow for years before suddenly demanding attention. The first major risk hiding inside many traditional IRAs is something financial professionals often call the retirement snowball effect. And for many retirees, it starts with good news. Their retirement account keeps growing, the market performs well, investments compound, the balance increases year after year. On the surface, that sounds exactly like what every retiree wants. After all, who wouldn't want a larger retirement account? But here's where the surprising reality begins. A larger traditional IRA doesn't just mean more money. It can also mean larger future required minimum distributions, commonly known as RMDs, and that's where many retirees get caught off guard. Most retirees understand the idea of saving money. Far fewer understand what happens when the government eventually requires some of that money to come back out. A traditional IRA was never designed to avoid taxes forever. It was designed to delay taxes. Eventually, the IRS wants its share, and that's exactly why RMD rules exist. Once retirees reach the required age, they generally must begin taking minimum withdrawals from their traditional IRA accounts, whether they need the money or not. That's the key detail many people miss. Whether they need the income or not, whether they plan to spend it or not, whether they want the withdrawal or not. The withdrawal becomes mandatory. Now let's look at a hypothetical example. Imagine a retiree named Michael. Michael retires with a traditional IRA worth $600,000. He's financially comfortable and doesn't need extra income immediately. His pension covers most of his living expenses. His Social Security benefits help even more. As a result, he decides to leave his IRA untouched. At first, that decision seems smart. Why withdraw money if he doesn't need it? Why pay taxes today when he can postpone them? So Michael waits, and waits, and waits. Meanwhile, his investments continue growing. A few strong market years arrive. His account climbs from $600,000 to $700,000. Then $800,000. Eventually, it approaches $1 million. Michael feels great about the growth. Most retirees would. But something else has been growing alongside that account balance. His future mandatory withdrawals. The larger the account becomes, the larger future RMDs can become. And larger RMDs often mean larger taxable income. This is where many retirees experience their second major surprise. The very growth they celebrated for years can eventually create a bigger tax challenge. Not because growth is bad. Growth is wonderful. The issue is that growth inside a traditional IRA often creates larger future distributions that become taxable when withdrawn. In other words, the account balance and future tax exposure may be growing together. Think about it this way. Many retirees focus on the investment side of the equation. They ask, how much can I earn? How much can my portfolio grow? How large can my account become? Those are important questions. But another question rarely receives the same attention. What happens when that larger balance eventually starts generating larger required withdrawals? That's where the RMD snowball begins rolling downhill. At first, it moves slowly, almost invisibly. But over time, the effect becomes more noticeable. A retiree who once expected modest withdrawals may find that mandatory distributions are significantly larger than anticipated. And those withdrawals don't exist in isolation. They're added on top of everything else. Social Security benefits, pension income, investment income, interest earnings, part-time work, other retirement distributions. Everything starts stacking together. The financial impact can be significant. A retiree who believed they would remain comfortably within a certain tax range may discover that increasing RMDs are pushing taxable income higher than expected. And this is why many retirees discover the issue too late. The problem develops quietly during years when no immediate action feels necessary. The account grows. The statements look better. The retirement outlook appears stronger. Nothing seems wrong. But beneath the surface, future withdrawal requirements may be becoming larger every year. The overlooked detail isn't the account growth itself. It's the tax consequences attached to that growth. Unfortunately, many people only evaluate those consequences after mandatory distributions have already begun. At that point, flexibility can be much more limited. The options available years earlier may no longer be available in the same way. And that's exactly why awareness matters. Understanding the RMD snowball isn't about avoiding growth. It's about recognizing that growth inside a traditional IRA creates both opportunities and responsibilities. The account balance tells only half the story. The future tax impact tells the other half. Retirees who understand both sides of that equation often make more informed decisions than those who focus only on accumulating assets. But surprisingly, larger mandatory withdrawals are not the only challenge waiting ahead. In fact, the next issue can create an even bigger financial surprise. Because it's not just about how much money comes out of your IRA. It's about what happens when those withdrawals begin interacting with every other source of retirement income you receive. At this point, some retirees may be thinking, okay, I understand that larger IRA balances can create larger required minimum distributions. But if I have to take the money eventually anyway, what's the big deal? That's a fair question. And the answer reveals one of the most overlooked retirement tax traps in America. Because the real issue isn't simply the size of the withdrawal. It's what happens when that withdrawal collides with every other source of income you're receiving at the same time. This is what many financial professionals refer to as a tax bracket trap. And for many retirees, it develops so gradually that they don't notice it until years later. To understand why, let's compare two hypothetical retirees. Meet David and Linda. Both retirees are the same age. Both accumulated roughly $900,000 in traditional IRA savings. Both receive Social Security benefits. Both have similar living expenses, and both worked equally hard throughout their careers. On paper, their situations look almost identical, but their retirement outcomes become very different. David spends very little time thinking about future taxes. His mindset is simple. If I don't need the money today, I'll leave it alone. At first, that strategy feels logical. His IRA continues growing. His account statements look healthy. He enjoys watching the balance increase. Years pass. Eventually, required withdrawals begin. Because the account has grown substantially, those withdrawals are larger than expected. Now David has Social Security income, he has investment income, and he has mandatory IRA distributions arriving every year. All of those income streams start stacking together. What once seemed like separate financial events now become one large taxable picture. Meanwhile, Linda takes a different approach. She understands that future taxation may matter just as much as investment growth. Instead of waiting for circumstances to force decisions, she periodically reviews her future income projections. She evaluates how future withdrawals might affect her overall tax situation. She doesn't necessarily eliminate taxes. That's not the goal. Her goal is creating flexibility. Over time, she gradually manages portions of her taxable income, instead of allowing future distributions to become increasingly concentrated in later retirement years. As a result, her future income picture remains more balanced. Now here's the important point. Neither retiree is doing anything wrong. Neither retiree is making reckless financial decisions. Both are acting based on reasonable assumptions. But one is proactively managing future income exposure, while the other is simply reacting when required withdrawals arrive. That difference can create surprisingly large consequences over time. The hidden danger is not usually one massive tax bill. It's the chain reaction that follows. Many retirees assume taxes operate independently. In reality, retirement income often behaves like a connected system. When one source increases, it can affect the entire picture. A larger IRA withdrawal may increase total taxable income. Higher taxable income can affect other financial calculations. Additional income may influence how efficiently retirement assets are utilized. What looked like a small decision years earlier can eventually ripple throughout an entire retirement plan. This is why seemingly harmless delays can become expensive. A retiree may postpone planning for 5 years because nothing appears urgent. Then another 5 years pass. Everything still feels fine. The account balance keeps growing. The retirement lifestyle remains comfortable. No immediate warning signs appear. But behind the scenes, future taxable income may be becoming increasingly concentrated into a smaller and smaller time frame. When mandatory withdrawals finally arrive, retirees sometimes discover they have fewer options than they once had. That's the overlooked detail. The issue isn't merely paying taxes. Everyone expects to pay some taxes. The issue is losing flexibility. Flexibility is one of the most valuable assets in retirement. The ability to choose when income is recognized, the ability to evaluate opportunities, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, the ability to respond to future tax environments. Those options often become more valuable as retirees age. And yet many retirees unknowingly surrender some of that flexibility simply by postponing decisions year after year. The surprising reality is that retirement tax efficiency isn't usually created through one dramatic move. It's often created through a series of thoughtful decisions made over time. Small adjustments, small evaluations, small planning opportunities. Individually, they may seem insignificant. Collectively, they can have a meaningful impact. That's why the comparison between David and Linda matters. Both saved diligently. Both entered retirement in strong financial positions. But one viewed retirement taxes as a future problem. The other viewed them as an ongoing planning consideration. That subtle difference shaped the choices available to each of them later. And by now, viewers might be thinking they've found the obvious solution. Maybe the answer is simply withdrawing money earlier. Maybe the answer is taking as much out as possible before future requirements arrive. But the reality is much more nuanced than that. Because the most important opportunity before 2028 isn't just about taking money out of a traditional IRA. It's about understanding why this particular window may be uniquely valuable, and why many retirees may never get another opportunity quite like it. Everything we've discussed so far leads to one critical question. Why are so many financial professionals paying attention to the years leading up to 2028? Why does this period matter so much? And why do some experts describe it as one of the most important retirement planning windows many traditional IRA owners will ever experience? The answer comes down to something retirees value more than almost anything else. Control. Not control over the stock market. Not control over inflation. Not control over future legislation. Control over their own financial decisions. Right now, many retirees still have something incredibly valuable: time. And time creates options. Unfortunately, options rarely last forever. This is where the concept of a retirement planning window becomes so important. Many retirees assume that if a strategy makes sense today, it will probably make sense 5 or 10 years from now. But retirement planning doesn't always work that way. In fact, some of the most valuable opportunities exist precisely because they are temporary. The years before 2028 represent a period when many retirees still have the ability to evaluate their future income picture before larger mandatory distributions begin dominating their decisions. That's the key distinction: making decisions before circumstances force them. Because once circumstances begin making the decisions for you, flexibility often starts disappearing. Think about the difference between being proactive and being reactive. A proactive retiree reviews future income projections, they estimate potential tax exposure, they evaluate how future withdrawals may affect retirement income. They assess opportunities while choices still exist. A reactive retiree waits, not because they're careless, not because they're irresponsible, but because everything appears fine. The account balance is growing. Bills are being paid. Retirement feels comfortable. Nothing seems urgent. Then eventually, future conditions arrive. Required withdrawals increase. Income sources begin stacking together. Taxable income rises. And suddenly, decisions that could have been made years earlier become much more difficult. That's the hidden danger. Most retirement tax challenges don't appear overnight. They develop gradually, which is exactly why so many people overlook them. The window doesn't close with a dramatic warning. There is no flashing alert. No official notice arrives saying, "Your planning opportunities are about to disappear." Instead, flexibility slowly declines over time. Every year that passes potentially reduces the number of choices available. And that's what makes the years leading up to 2028 so significant. Many financial planners aren't necessarily focused on predicting exactly what future tax laws will look like. No one knows that with certainty. What they do know is that future tax environments can change. Rules evolve. Income thresholds change. Retirement regulations change. Planning opportunities come and go. History has demonstrated that repeatedly. That's why waiting carries its own risk. Many retirees spend enormous amounts of time worrying about market volatility. Yet they spend very little time considering planning opportunities that are available today, but may not exist in the future. The surprising reality is that opportunity risk can be just as important as market risk. Opportunity risk is what happens when retirees delay action until circumstances become less favorable. Let's look at two hypothetical retirees. James and Carol both retire with strong savings. Both have similar IRA balances. Both are financially secure. James views retirement planning as something he'll deal with later. His philosophy is simple. If a problem shows up, I'll handle it then. For several years, that approach seems perfectly reasonable. Nothing appears wrong. Everything works. The account continues growing. Life goes on. Carol takes a different approach. She doesn't rush into decisions. She doesn't panic. She simply uses the available window to understand her future income picture. She evaluates possibilities while flexibility remains available. She focuses on preparation rather than prediction. Fast forward several years. Future conditions arrive. The opportunities that once existed have become narrower. James now finds himself making decisions within a much smaller set of options. Carol is operating from a position of preparation. Neither retiree can control the future, but one entered the future with a plan. The other entered hoping flexibility would still be available when needed. That's the contrast every retiree should understand. This isn't really a story about 2028, it's a story about timing. The most valuable retirement decisions are often made before they become necessary, not after. The retirees who recognize planning windows early often have more choices available than those who wait until external forces dictate the outcome. And that's why so many experts focus on the years ahead. Because once future conditions arrive, retirees may discover that opportunities available today are no longer available in the same form. Many retirees discover this reality too late. They spend years focusing exclusively on growing assets. Only later do they realize that preserving flexibility may have been just as important. The good news is that understanding this opportunity doesn't require guessing the future. It simply requires recognizing the value of choice while choice still exists. And now that we've explored why this planning window matters so much, the next question becomes the most practical one of all. What exactly should retirees be evaluating right now before that window becomes significantly narrower? By now, you might be wondering, okay, I understand the risk, I understand the opportunity, but what should I actually do? That's exactly the right question. Because the purpose of this video isn't to create fear, it's to create awareness. And awareness is only valuable if it leads to informed decisions. The good news is that many retirees still have options. The better news is that taking the first step doesn't require making any immediate changes. In many cases, it simply starts with understanding your future retirement income picture more clearly than you do today. The biggest mistake many retirees make is assuming they'll deal with future tax issues when those issues arrive. The retirees who often experience the best outcomes usually do something different. They look ahead, they ask questions early. They identify potential challenges before those challenges become permanent. So let's walk through several practical areas worth evaluating before this planning window becomes narrower. The first is understanding your future required minimum distributions. Many retirees know RMDs exist. Far fewer know approximately what their future RMDs may look like. That's an important distinction. If your traditional IRA continues growing for several years, future withdrawals could become much larger than expected. Knowing those estimates today can help you understand what your future income picture might look like. Think of it as looking at a weather forecast. You may not know exactly what conditions will be years from now, but having a reasonable projection can help you prepare. The second consideration is evaluating potential Roth conversion opportunities. Now, this is where many viewers immediately jump to conclusions. Some people hear the phrase Roth conversion and assume everyone should do one. Others assume nobody should. The reality is much more nuanced. Every retirement situation is different. A Roth conversion may be beneficial for some retirees. For others, it may not make sense at all. The key point is not whether you should complete a Roth conversion. The key point is understanding whether the opportunity deserves evaluation before future conditions potentially change. That's why many retirees choose to discuss this topic with qualified tax and financial professionals. Not to chase a trend, not to follow generic advice, but to determine whether the strategy aligns with their personal circumstances. Another important step is estimating future tax brackets. Many retirees know their current tax situation. Far fewer have attempted to estimate their future one. This is where retirement planning often becomes much more revealing. A retiree may assume future taxes will naturally be lower. Then, after reviewing projected income sources, they discover a very different picture. Social Security benefits, pension income, investment earnings, traditional IRA withdrawals. All of these pieces eventually come together. Understanding how they interact can provide valuable insight. The goal isn't predicting the future perfectly, the goal is avoiding surprises. And speaking of surprises, another area retirees often overlook is their actual income needs. Many people focus heavily on account balances. But retirement planning isn't really about account balances, it's about cash flow. It's about understanding how much income is needed to support the lifestyle you want. A retiree with clear income goals often has an easier time evaluating future withdrawal strategies than someone operating without a long-term plan. That's why reviewing spending needs can be just as important as reviewing investment balances. The next consideration is creating a long-term withdrawal strategy. This is where many retirees benefit from stepping back and viewing retirement as a multi-decade journey rather than a year-to-year process. Instead of asking, "What should I do this year?" the question becomes, what withdrawal approach may provide flexibility over the next 10, 15, or 20 years? That shift in perspective can be powerful, because retirement decisions rarely exist in isolation. A decision made today may influence options available years from now. The retirees who understand this often focus less on finding a perfect strategy and more on maintaining flexibility. And flexibility is really the central theme of everything we've discussed. The goal isn't eliminating taxes. The goal isn't making dramatic changes overnight. The goal isn't rushing into complex strategies. The goal is preserving choices. The goal is reducing future surprises. The goal is making sure future decisions are being made intentionally rather than under pressure. That's why informed planning matters. Not because anyone can predict exactly what the future holds, but because preparation often creates opportunities that reaction cannot. The retirees who take time to understand their future income picture frequently enter the next phase of retirement with greater confidence and clarity. And perhaps most importantly, they reduce the likelihood of discovering hidden problems when their ability to respond is more limited. But here's the question every retiree should ask themselves. What happens if none of these issues are evaluated at all? What happens if years pass, opportunities disappear, and future decisions are left entirely to circumstance? Because understanding the cost of inaction may be just as important as understanding the strategies themselves. As we wrap up, there is one important idea that ties everything together. The cost of waiting too long is rarely obvious in the moment. Most retirees do not wake up one morning and suddenly make a disastrous financial decision. In reality, retirement tax problems often develop slowly over time. They are the result of opportunities that were postponed, strategies that were never explored, and decisions that were delayed year after year. That is why understanding your traditional IRA is so important. Many retirement savers assume that once they retire, their planning is essentially complete. They believe the hard work is behind them. The money has been saved, the accounts have been built, and now it is simply a matter of taking withdrawals when needed. But retirement planning does not end when your paycheck stops. In many ways, retirement marks the beginning of an entirely new planning phase. One where taxes, withdrawals, income management, and long-term flexibility become just as important as saving and investing once were. The good news is that many traditional IRA owners currently have more control than they realize. The choices available today may influence how much tax is paid years from now. The timing of withdrawals, the coordination of income sources, and the evaluation of future tax exposure can all play a role in shaping retirement outcomes. Unfortunately, many people never take the time to evaluate those options. They assume things will work themselves out. They assume future tax rates will remain favorable. They assume required distributions will not have a major impact. They assume there will always be plenty of time to make adjustments later. And sometimes those assumptions turn out to be expensive. On the other hand, retirees who regularly review their plans often put themselves in a much stronger position. They stay informed, they monitor changes in tax law, they reassess their goals as circumstances evolve. They work with qualified professionals when appropriate and make thoughtful decisions based on the information available to them. Most importantly, they preserve flexibility. Flexibility is one of the most valuable assets in retirement. When you maintain flexibility, you have more choices. You can adapt to changing tax rules. You can respond to shifts in income needs. You can adjust to market conditions and personal circumstances without being forced into decisions at the worst possible time. Those who ignore planning often discover that their options become more limited as the years pass. And that brings us to the central takeaway of this discussion. The biggest retirement tax bill is rarely created by one bad decision. More often, it is created by years of decisions that were never made. It is created when opportunities are repeatedly delayed. It is created when important questions go unanswered. It is created when retirees assume that future challenges will somehow solve themselves. That does not mean anyone should rush into action out of fear. Good retirement planning is not about panic. It is not about reacting to headlines. It is not about making drastic changes without understanding the consequences. Instead, it is about staying informed, asking questions, reviewing your options, and making thoughtful decisions while opportunities still exist. The goal is not perfection. The goal is preparation. Every retirement journey is different. Every household has different priorities, different income sources, different tax situations, and different long-term goals. But regardless of your circumstances, one principle remains consistent. The earlier you understand your options, the more choices you are likely to have. That is why now may be a good time to review your retirement plan, revisit your assumptions, and consider whether your current strategy still aligns with your future goals. Pay attention to tax developments. Stay informed about changes that could affect retirement accounts. Continue learning about the opportunities and risks that may lie ahead. Because the window of opportunity available today may not remain open forever. And while nobody can predict exactly what future tax laws will look like, those who stay engaged are often better prepared for whatever comes next. Now I would like to hear from you. What retirement planning issue concerns you most right now? Is it future tax rates, required minimum distributions, Social Security taxation, healthcare costs, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your question may help someone else who is facing the same challenge. And if you found this discussion helpful, stay connected for future updates and insights designed to help you make more informed retirement decisions before today's opportunities become tomorrow's regrets.